Dwayne, at 37 years old, supervised the grounds crew at Madison University for a salary of $52,000 a year. He was a man who understood the earth, the slow and certain logic of seasons, the way things grew with patience and care. He believed life and marriage worked the same way. He believed this until the Friday his wife, began packing her expensive graphite-colored $450 Toomey carry-on for another one of her quarterly solo trips, and the quiet, manicured lawn of his heart began to show cracks. For 3 years, these trips had been a non-negotiable part of their marriage. "It's how I recharge, baby," she'd say, her voice smooth as polished stone. "After what I went through with Marcus, with the sickness and losing him, I just need time to be alone with my thoughts." Marcus was her late husband, a man Dwayne had never met, a man whose tragic story was the foundation of Imani's profound need for solitude. Dwayne, a simple and loving man, had always honored this. He'd pack her a lunch for the road, check the tire pressure on her white 2020 Acura RDX, a $38,000 vehicle they were still making $580 monthly payments on, and kiss her forehead, telling her to find her peace. But this time was different. A week prior, while looking for a misplaced property tax bill in the desk they shared, he'd found a receipt from a gas station. It was tucked inside a book on landscape architecture. The receipt was from 3 months ago, time-stamped during her last solo trip. The location was not the serene, isolated state park she'd described, but a small town called Wisconsin Dells, 4 hours north. An address was scrawled on the back in her elegant cursive, 114 Willow Creek Lane. He'd looked it up. It wasn't a hiking lodge or a spiritual retreat. It was a residential house, a small lake cabin according to the county parcel map. A cold, heavy feeling had settled in his gut, the kind of damp chill that signaled a deep frost was coming. He said nothing. He just put the receipt in the pocket of his $35 Carhartt work jacket and waited. Now, watching her fold a $250 silk blouse into the suitcase, he felt a chasm opening between the life he thought he had and the one that was possibly terrifyingly real. "You're quiet today," Imani observed, not looking at him. Her hair was in immaculate box braids, each one a perfect glossy rope that fell to the middle of her back, a style that cost $300 every 8 weeks. "Just tired," Dwayne lied, his voice sounding foreign in his own ears. "Long week with the new sod on Bascom Hill." She smiled, a quick, dismissive flash of white teeth. "Well, try to relax this weekend. Don't just work in the yard the whole time." It was a casual command, wrapped in the guise of care. She zipped the Toomey bag, the sound like a final, decisive tear. She had no idea he had already taken the day off, that his own bag, a worn canvas duffel bag he'd owned for 15 years, was already packed and hidden in the bed of his 2014 Ford F-150. He had no idea what was coming, but he knew he had to see it for himself. Have you ever felt that sickening lurch in your stomach when you realize the story you've been told might be a lie? Tell us in the comments if you've ever had to follow a gut feeling that something was deeply wrong. The foundation of their life, or so Dwayne believed, was built in the quiet, tree-lined streets of the Westmoreland neighborhood in Madison. They had bought the 1,400-square-foot bungalow 2 years ago for $380,000. It was a stretch on his salary, but Imani, with her $95,000 a year job as a marketing director, had insisted. "We deserve a good address, Dwayne," she had said, running her hand over the original oak trim. "It's an investment in our future." The down payment, a sum of $76,000, had come from the inheritance his mother, his beloved mama, had left him. Imani couldn't contribute, she'd explained, because Marcus's long illness had wiped out her savings and destroyed her credit. It was another brick in the tragic backstory that made Dwayne's heart ache for her. He had signed the papers alone, his solid, practical signature the only one required. Their life inside that house was a carefully curated picture of domestic normalcy. Imani had a taste for things that came in sleek boxes with brand names. She'd picked out the $2,800 restoration hardware sofa that was too stiff for Dwayne to ever feel comfortable on, and the $200 crate and barrel dining set where they ate the simple, hearty meals he usually cooked. He was the one who made her favorite chicken and dumplings, the recipe his mama had taught him, simmering it for hours after a long day of mowing, planting, and pruning. He'd serve it to her on the $80 a plate dinnerware she'd ordered online. He was a man of simple needs. His favorite chair was a scuffed leather recliner he'd bought for $150 at a garage sale. His watch was an $89 Timex Expedition, its face scratched from years of work. He wore $45 red cap work pants and steel-toed boots that cost $60. His pleasure came from the tangible world, the scent of freshly cut grass, the satisfaction of a perfectly edged flower bed, the deep, luminous brown of his own skin after a day in the sun. He tended to their small yard with the same meticulous care he gave the university campus. He planted a garden every spring, tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, a patch of earth that gave back more than you put in. Imani appreciated the results, but not the process. "I can't believe you like digging in the dirt," she'd say, watching from the pristine deck, a $12 glass of wine in her hand. "Why don't we just hire a service? It's only a few hundred a month." To Dwayne, that was like asking why a painter didn't just buy a print. The work was the point. His love was shown in acts of service. He was the one who fixed the leaky faucet with a $5 washer, who patched the drywall in the hallway, who shoveled the heavy Wisconsin snow from their walk at 5 a.m. before he left for his own physically demanding job. He remembered their wedding day vividly, a small affair at the county courthouse, because Imani said a big wedding would be too painful, too full of memories of her first. She had looked stunning in a simple, elegant white dress that cost $500. She'd cried, and he'd held her, this beautiful, grieving black woman, and promised to spend the rest of his life turning her sorrow into joy. He believed he was her safe harbor, the steady, reliable man who could finally give her peace. He thought their love was a perennial, something that would come back stronger every year, its roots digging deeper into the solid ground of their shared life. He had no idea he was tending a garden planted in someone else's soil. The outrage began not as a storm, but as a series of low-pressure systems, subtle shifts in the atmosphere of their marriage that Dwayne had initially dismissed. Looking back, he could see the signs had been there all along, accumulating like static before a lightning strike. The cruelty was rarely overt. It was in the casual dismissals, the condescending remarks that chipped away at his sense of worth. There was the incident at a university faculty dinner he'd been invited to. He'd been proud to bring Imani, to show off his intelligent, beautiful wife. He'd been talking to a literature professor, a kind older man, about the specific challenges of maintaining the campus's historic oak trees. Imani had drifted over, placing a perfectly manicured hand on his arm. "Don't let my husband bore you with his gardening stories," she'd said with a light, tinkling laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Dwayne can talk about fertilizer for an hour." The professor had smiled politely, but Dwayne felt himself shrink. Later, in the car, he'd tried to explain that it was his career, not a hobby. "Oh, honey, I know," she'd said, patting his thigh. "But it's just grass and trees. These are PhDs. Let's try to talk about something more substantial." He hadn't known what to say. The words, "just grass and trees," echoed in his mind for weeks. It was his life's work, the thing that brought him quiet pride, reduced to a trifle. Her phone was another source of quiet friction. It was a new iPhone 14, a $999 device she guarded like a state secret. It was always angled away from him, and she'd quickly lock the screen if he walked into the room. Once, he'd asked who she was texting so furiously. Just my sister? She'd snapped, her voice sharper than necessary. Can a woman have a private conversation? The defensiveness was a red flag, but he'd let it go, telling himself he was being insecure. He trusted her. He had to. Trust was the bedrock. Then there were the inconsistencies about Marcus. The story of her late husband was a narrative she controlled completely. When his Auntie Carol, a woman with a warm heart and a sharp memory, had asked Imani where Marcus was from, Imani had said, Milwaukee? Dwayne distinctly remembered her telling him Marcus was from Chicago. When Auntie Carol pressed gently, asking for his last name to see if she knew the family, Imani had become flustered. It's all just too painful to revisit, Auntie, she'd said, her eyes welling up with convenient tears. I prefer to look forward. Auntie Carol had dropped it, but she'd given Dwayne a long, searching look later that evening, a look that said, Be careful, son. The financial betrayals were the most concrete. She managed their joint checking account, citing her superior financial acumen. But money was always tight, despite their combined income of nearly $150,000. When Dwayne wanted to spend $200 on a new commercial-grade lawnmower for his side jobs, she'd sighed dramatically. Dwayne, we just don't have it. My student loans, the car payment, It all adds up. Yet a week later, she came home with a $1,800 Burberry trench coat. It was an investment piece, she'd justified. It will last forever. He saw the statement later. She had pulled the money from their joint savings, the account that was supposed to be for emergencies and the new roof. The final escalation came the night before she left. She was packing, laying out clothes that seemed far too glamorous for a solitary trip to the woods. He saw a slinky black dress that cost at least $300 and a pair of heels he'd never seen before. Bringing fancy clothes for your solo trip? He asked, trying to sound casual. She didn't miss a beat. Sometimes a woman just wants to dress up for herself. It makes me feel good. Feel human again. She turned to him, her expression hardening slightly. You wouldn't understand? You're happy in your work clothes. It was another dismissal, another line drawn between her sophisticated world and his simple one. She was framing his contentment as a lack of ambition, a failure of imagination. That was the moment the seed of doubt, watered by months of small cruelties and inconsistencies, finally broke through the soil. It was the moment he knew he had to follow her. He had to see the truth, no matter how much it might cost him. He watched her place the expensive clothes into her expensive luggage, a perfect facade for a perfect lie. He felt nothing but a cold, heavy certainty. The man who tended gardens was about to go pull a weed up by its roots. The drive north began at 6:47 a.m. on Friday. A heavy gray mist hung over Madison, the kind of weather that seeped into your bones. Dwayne drove his 2014 Ford F-150, a vehicle with 187,000 miles on it, its cab smelling faintly of soil and motor oil. It was a truck he owned outright, a piece of his life that was unequivocally his. He had left an hour after Imani, giving her a generous head start. He'd filled the tank for $78.50 at a quick trip, the cost a small, bitter price for the truth. He clutched the steering wheel, his knuckles white. His hands, usually steady and capable, trembled slightly. For 4 hours, he drove through the rolling Wisconsin farmland, a landscape he usually found beautiful and calming. Today, it was just a gray-green blur. He kept a safe distance, a quarter-mile behind her pristine white Acura, a bright, soulless shape against the dreary backdrop. Rain began to fall an hour into the drive, smearing the windshield. Each rhythmic slap of the wipers felt like a tick of a clock counting down to a moment that would change everything. He sipped cold, bitter coffee from a $24 Stanley thermos, the heat long gone. He felt hollowed out, an empty vessel moving toward a destination he didn't want to reach. He thought about the life they had built, the laughter over dinner, the way she'd rest her head on his shoulder while they watched movies. Was any of it real? Or was he just a convenience? A stable, reliable man with a house and a steady income. A perfect cover for a life he knew nothing about. The word widow echoed in his head. It was a word of profound sadness and respect. She had wielded it like a shield, and he, in his love and pity, had never dared to look behind it. He followed her off the interstate at the Wisconsin Dells exit. The town was a garish collection of water parks and tourist traps, a bizarre setting for a spiritual retreat. She didn't head toward the state parks on the outskirts. She navigated a series of winding residential roads that led toward the lake. Dwayne slowed, letting a few cars get between them. He pulled up the address on his phone, 114 Willow Creek Lane. His heart hammered against his ribs. He saw her Acura turn onto the street and parked his truck 2 blocks away, under the dripping branches of a large maple tree. He pulled out the pair of $120 Bushnell binoculars he used for birdwatching and focused them on the address. It was a charming A-frame cabin, painted a dark green, with a wide porch overlooking the water. It looked cozy and lived in. Smoke curled from its stone chimney. This was no rental. This was a home. He waited. The minutes stretched into an eternity. The rain drummed on the roof of his truck. He watched the front door of the cabin, his breath fogging the cold glass of the driver's side window. Then at 11:15 a.m., he saw Imani's car pull into the driveway. She got out. Not with the weary posture of a long-distance driver, but with a light, eager step. She didn't even glance around. She walked directly to the front door. Before she could even knock, the door swung open. A man stood in the doorway. He was a tall, well-built black man with short locks, wearing a comfortable-looking gray sweater. He was smiling, a wide, easy smile of genuine welcome. And then Dwayne saw it. The moment that broke his world in two. Imani didn't offer a polite handshake or a friendly hug. She melted into the man's arms, her body molding against his. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her hair. It was an embrace of deep, practiced intimacy. It was the embrace of a husband greeting his wife. Through the powerful lenses of the binoculars, Dwayne could see the look on her face as she pulled back to kiss him. It was a look of pure, unadulterated joy. A look he hadn't seen on her face in years. A look he now realized had never been for him. The binoculars fell from his trembling hands and clattered onto the passenger seat. He felt nothing, just a vast, silent emptiness. The rain kept falling. The 4-hour drive back to Madison was a journey through a gray, featureless void. Dwayne drove on autopilot, his mind a static hum. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained a sheet of impenetrable cloud. He didn't listen to the radio. He didn't stop for food. The only sound was the drone of the tires on the wet pavement. He felt a strange, chilling calm settle over him. The wild, hot pain of the initial discovery had cooled into something hard and dense, like a block of ice forming in his chest. His love, his trust, his entire 3-year marriage, it had all been a lie. A meticulously crafted, long-running deception. He was not a husband. He was a fool. He got back to their house in Westmoreland just after 4 p.m. The house felt alien. A stage set for a play whose script he now knew was a complete fiction. He walked through the rooms, touching the expensive furniture Imani had chosen, looking at the framed photos of their wedding day. In every picture, he was beaming, his deep brown skin luminous with happiness. She was smiling too, but now he could see the lie in her eyes. It was a performance, a very, very good one. He knew he couldn't confront her, not yet. A raw, emotional explosion was what she would expect. It would give her the chance to cry, to apologize, to manipulate, to spin another web of lies. No, He would not give her that satisfaction. He would meet her deception with a cold, unyielding strategy. He went to the Walgreens on University Avenue and bought a simple, black and white composition notebook for $3.99 and a pack of ballpoint pens. He went home and wrote the date and time at the top of the first page, Friday, 5:12 p.m. He wrote down what he had seen. Imani arrived at 114 Willow Creek Lane, greeted by unidentified black male, embraced and kissed, entered home together. The weekend was an exercise in brutal self-control. He needed to act normal. He needed to gather more evidence, not of the infidelity. He had seen that with his own eyes, but of the structure of the lie itself. He spent Saturday morning in the yard, methodically weeding the flower beds, his hands finding comfort in the familiar work. At 10:30 a.m., his phone rang. It was her. "Hey, baby." Her voice was bright, airy, and utterly fake. "Just wanted to check in. I had the most amazing hike this morning. The air is so crisp up here." Dwayne looked up at the uniformly gray sky over Madison, knowing the weather radar showed the same system stalled over the entire state. "Oh yeah?" he said, his own voice a marvel of calm neutrality. "That's great. Is it sunny up there?" "Oh, gorgeous," she lied without a flicker of hesitation. "Not a cloud in the sky. It's doing my soul so much good." "I'm glad to hear that," he said. He felt the ice in his chest expand. After he hung up, he opened his notebook. Saturday, 10:32 a.m., Imani called, claimed to be hiking, claimed weather was sunny and clear. Weather report for Wisconsin Dells shows overcast and 48 degrees. Each lie she told was another nail in her coffin, another piece of evidence he was meticulously documenting. She called again on Sunday afternoon, asking what he was up to. "Just watching the Packers game," he told her, though the television was off. He was actually online on the Dane County Public Records portal. He didn't know what he was looking for exactly. A property deed? A business license? He started with the basics, marriage records. He typed her full name, Imani Wallace, into the search field. He found their own record first, Dwayne Jackson and Imani Wallace, married October 16th, 2021. He kept scrolling back, and then he found it. A marriage certificate dated June 3rd, 2017. Imani Wallace and Roderick Cole. His blood went cold. He clicked on the divorce records database. He searched both their names. 0 results. He searched again, expanding the date range. Nothing. There was no record of a divorce. She hadn't just cheated on him. She had committed a felony. She wasn't a widow. She was a bigamist. And he, Dwayne Jackson, was not her husband. He had never been her husband. Their entire marriage was a fraud, void from the very beginning. He closed the laptop, his hands steady. He opened his notebook and wrote, "Imani Wallace is still legally married to Roderick Cole." The game was over. She just didn't know it yet. Monday morning arrived, not with the dread of a new work week, but with the cold, clear purpose of a military operation. At 8 a.m., Dwayne, dressed in his best, a simple dark gray $300 suit he'd bought for his mother's funeral, walked into the Dane County Courthouse. He bypassed the elevators and took the stairs, the deliberate, solid steps grounding him. He paid the $15 fee for certified copies of both marriage certificates, his and Imani's from 2021, and hers and Roderick Cole's from 2017. The clerk handed him the documents, each with a raised seal. They felt heavy in his hand, like weapons. His next stop was a sleek glass tower downtown that reflected the gray sky. He had an appointment at 9:30 a.m. with an attorney named Anya Sharma. He'd found her online, a top-rated family law and civil litigation attorney. Her website projected an image of no-nonsense competence. Her office was on the 14th floor, a space of quiet, expensive minimalism. Ms. Sharma was a sharp, impeccably dressed woman in her late 40s. She listened without interruption as Dwayne laid out his story, his voice even and devoid of emotion. He placed the certified marriage certificates on her polished mahogany desk. He opened his $3.99 notebook and detailed the lies, the timeline, and the discovery at the cabin. He showed her the photos he'd taken from his truck, blurry but clear enough to show Imani and Roderick's arms on the porch. Ms. Sharma reviewed the documents, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she looked up at him, her gaze direct. "Mr. Jackson," she said, her voice precise, "what you have here is not a divorce case. Your marriage to Ms. Wallace, or Ms. Cole, as it were, is what the law calls void ab initio. It was never legal to begin with. We will file for an annulment on the grounds of bigamy." She then leaned forward. "But we will not stop there. You have been the victim of a calculated long-term fraud. You contributed your inheritance to a house under the belief you were building a marital estate. Your wife, Ms. Cole, has systematically funneled funds from your joint accounts while misrepresenting her marital status and financial situation. We will file a separate civil fraud claim against both Imani Cole and Roderick Cole. We will seek punitive damages and the return of every single dollar you have lost." Her fee was $450 per hour. The retainer was $5,000. Dwayne didn't hesitate. He pulled out the checkbook for his personal savings account, the one containing the last of his mother's inheritance and his own careful savings. He wrote the check, the ink flowing smoothly. It felt like the best money he had ever spent. It was the price of his freedom. "We need to establish how much money she has taken," Ms. Sharma said, already shifting into strategic planning. "I will subpoena the records for your joint account, but I also need you to get me every statement you have." She also told him to start documenting every valuable asset in the house that Imani had purchased with joint funds. The $2,800 sofa, the $200 dining set, the collection of designer handbags in her closet worth at least $10,000. "They have no idea this is coming," Dwayne said, the first hint of feeling entering his voice. "No," Ms. Sharma agreed, a thin, cold smile touching her lips. "They do not. And that is our strategic advantage. We will serve them simultaneously. It will be a coordinated strike." For the first time in 3 days, Dwayne felt a flicker of something other than ice in his veins. It was the promise of justice. The strike was planned with the precision of a battlefield maneuver. On Monday afternoon, Ms. Sharma dispatched 2 process servers. The first, a burly ex-cop named Gus, took the 2-hour drive north to Wisconsin Dells. His fee was $150 plus mileage. His target was Roderick Cole at 114 Willow Creek Lane. The second server, a woman named Maria, was assigned to wait outside the downtown Madison office building where Imani worked as a marketing director. Her instructions were to serve Imani the moment she arrived for work on Tuesday morning. At 3:45 p.m. on Monday, Gus arrived at the lake cabin. He walked up the stone path and knocked firmly on the dark green door. Roderick Cole answered, the same man Dwayne had seen in his binoculars. He was holding a coffee mug and looked mildly annoyed by the interruption. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Are you Roderick Cole?" Gus asked, his voice a flat baritone. "Yeah, what's this about?" Gus handed him the thick legal envelope. "You've been served." Roderick took the papers, a confused frown on his face. He tore open the envelope right there in the doorway. Gus remained on the porch, a silent, impassive witness. Roderick's eyes scanned the first page. A summons for a civil fraud complaint. Plaintiff, Dwayne Jackson. Defendants, Roderick Cole and Imani Cole. He saw the allegations: conspiracy to commit fraud, unjust enrichment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. His face, which had been relaxed and handsome, began to tighten. He flipped through the pages, his confusion turning to a dawning, sickening horror. He saw the attached exhibits, a copy of his marriage certificate to Imani from 2017, and a copy of her marriage certificate to Dwayne from 2021. "What the hell is this?" Roderick said, looking up at Gus, his voice a choked whisper. "This is a mistake." "I just deliver the papers," Gus said, turning to leave. "You'll need to talk to your lawyer." He walked back to his car, leaving Roderick standing in the doorway, the white papers trembling in his hand. The comfortable world inside his cozy cabin suddenly and irrevocably shattered. The next morning, the second hammer fell. At 8:52 a.m., Imani's white Acura RDX pulled into her reserved spot in the corporate parking garage. She stepped out, looking refreshed and confident in an $8,700 Armani suit, ready to start her week. She breezed into the gleaming lobby of her office building, her $600 Michael Kors handbag swinging at her side. As she approached the security turnstile, Maria stepped forward. "Imani Cole?" Maria asked, holding out the matching legal envelope. Imani corrected her, a hint of annoyance in her voice. "It's Imani Jackson." "These documents are for you," Maria said, pressing the envelope into her hand. Imani, with a huff of impatience, took the papers and proceeded through the turnstile. She rode the elevator to her floor, opening the envelope as she walked down the hall. Her colleagues saw her stop dead in the middle of the carpeted corridor. They saw her radiant, deep brown skin turn a sickly, ashen color. Her perfectly composed face, usually a mask of corporate confidence, crumpled in disbelief. She stumbled into her glass-walled office, sinking into her $900 ergonomic chair. She stared at the petition for annulment, the words "void ab initio" seeming to leap off the page. She saw the fraud complaint with its detailed accounting of her deception. Her carefully constructed world, built on a foundation of lies and a good man's trust, had just been demolished in a matter of minutes. Her hand, shaking uncontrollably, reached for her phone. Dwayne's phone, sitting on the passenger seat of his work truck on the other side of town, began to ring. He looked at the screen, saw her name, and silenced the call. A moment later, a text message appeared. "Dwayne, call me now." "There's been a terrible mistake." He didn't reply. A second call. He silenced it again. The voicemail notification popped up. He knew this was just the beginning. The collapse had begun. What would you do if you received papers like that out of the blue? The shock and confusion must be overwhelming. Let us know your thoughts on this moment of impact. The consequences cascaded with brutal, systematic efficiency. Imani and Roderick's lives, built on a shared deception, were dismantled piece by piece, the process as methodical as Dwayne tending a garden. The first consequence was professional. The civil fraud complaint filed by Ms. Sharma was a public document. It named Imani's employer, alleging that she had used company time and resources to communicate with her other husband and manage their illicit finances. By Wednesday, a reporter from the Wisconsin State Journal had picked up the story. By noon, Imani was called into a meeting with Human Resources and the company's general counsel. She was fired, effective immediately, for violating the company's code of conduct. Her $95,000 a year career, the source of her pride and the engine of her expensive tastes, was gone. In the tight-knit Madison business community, she was now radioactive. The second consequence was financial. Ms. Sharma's legal team moved swiftly. They placed a lien on the Wisconsin Dells cabin, freezing Roderick's ability to sell or refinance it. Forensic accountants, costing $300 an hour, began dissecting 3 years of bank records from the joint account Dwayne had shared with Imani. They uncovered a pattern of systematic transfers, small amounts at first, $200 here, $300 there, labeled student loan or credit card. Over time, the amounts grew. The accountants traced a total of $47,850 funneled from Dwayne's life into the one Imani shared with Roderick. This money had been used for their property taxes, for a $5,000 boat lift, for vacations to Aruba that Imani had told Dwayne were work conferences. The fraud claim sought the return of every penny, plus punitive damages that could easily double the amount. The third consequence was the house. Because the marriage was legally non-existent, Imani had no marital claim to the Westmoreland bungalow. The entire $76,000 down payment had been Dwayne's inheritance, a fact documented by bank records. Dwayne's name was the only one on the mortgage. Ms. Sharma filed for an emergency court order. 10 days after being served, Imani was met at the door by 2 sheriff's deputies. She was permitted to gather her personal belongings under their watchful eyes. She tried to take the Restoration Hardware sofa and the Crate and Barrel dining set. The deputy consulted the order. "Ma'am, only your clothes and personal effects. The furniture stays." She left with 2 suitcases, her face a mask of cold fury, getting into a taxi she'd called, her Acura RDX having already been repossessed due to 2 missed payments. The social fallout was just as devastating. Mutual friends were horrified. The story of the tragic widow had been replaced by the sordid tale of a con artist. Subpoenas for depositions arrived at the homes of people who had been her closest confidants, forcing them to recount under oath the lies she had told them. Friendships evaporated overnight. She was an outcast. Throughout it all, Imani's attempts to contact Dwayne became a case study in psychological collapse. The initial angry texts gave way to a series of frantic voicemails. Voicemail 1. "Dwayne, what have you done? You are ruining my life over a misunderstanding. You were supposed to talk to me first. This is insane." Voicemail 2. "Okay, look, I can explain everything. Roderick and I, it's complicated. We were separated, but the paperwork was a mess. It's not what it looks like. I always loved you, Dwayne. You have to believe that." Voicemail 3, crying. "Please, please just talk to me. I've lost my job. They're going to take the cabin. Roderick he's a wreck. You can't do this to us. To me? I made a mistake. A terrible mistake, but I don't deserve this." Voicemail 4, pleading. "I'll give you anything. A divorce, whatever you want. Just drop the fraud claim. Please, Dwayne, I'm begging you, don't do this. Think of what we had." Dwayne listened to each message once, his face impassive. Then he saved them to a file and forwarded the audio to Ms. Sharma's office as further evidence. He never replied. Her words were meaningless now. The only language he was interested in was the language of the law, the cold, hard text of court filings and bank statements. The consequences were not his cruelty. They were simply the harvest she had sown. 1 year later, the world had found its color again. It was a warm Saturday in late September, the kind of perfect autumn day in Wisconsin that feels like a gift. The sun cast long, golden shadows across the great lawn of Bascom Hill. Dwayne was there, not as a supervisor barking orders, but as a teacher. He stood with 2 teenagers, a boy named Leo and a girl named Ania, both part of a new apprenticeship program he had established in partnership with a local community center. He had used a small portion of the settlement money from the fraud case, a final judgment of $62,500 in his favor, to fund the first 2 years of the program, providing stipends and equipment for kids from underserved neighborhoods. "See how the soil is compacted here?" he said, his voice calm and steady. He crumbled a bit of dark earth in his hand, the rich scent filling the air. "It needs aeration. You have to give the roots room to breathe. Everything needs room to breathe if you want it to grow strong." Ania, her hair in 2 vibrant puffs, listened intently, her expression serious. Leo nodded, his eyes focused on Dwayne's hands. Dwayne saw the same spark of curiosity in them that he'd felt as a boy, the pull of the living world. He was building something new, something that would grow and last. He was turning his pain into purpose. The house in Westmoreland was quiet now. It was his sanctuary. He had sold all of Imani's expensive, soulless furniture for a fraction of what she'd paid, donating the $3,400 to a local women's shelter. He'd replaced it with simple, sturdy pieces he'd found at antique shops or built himself in his garage. The walls were painted a warm, calming sage green. The garden in the backyard was overflowing with late-season tomatoes and hardy kale. The house was no longer a stage set. It was a home, filled with the quiet, authentic presence of one person living an honest life. That evening, as the sun began to set, casting a fiery orange glow over Lake Mendota, Dwayne was in his small, 14-foot fishing boat, a $2,000 used vessel he'd bought with cash. The engine was off. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of water against the hull and the distant call of a loon. He cast his line, the lure making a soft plunk as it hit the water. He wasn't much of a fisherman, but he loved the peace of it, the feeling of being a small part of something vast and beautiful. He thought of Imani sometimes, not with anger or bitterness, but with a kind of distant pity. He had heard she'd moved back to Milwaukee to live with her sister, her life in Madison a ruin. He hoped she would find a way to live honestly, for her own sake. He had forgiven her, not for her, but for him. Forgiveness, he'd learned, wasn't about excusing the betrayal. It was about refusing to let it poison your own soil. He had to keep his own garden healthy. As the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving the sky a brilliant tapestry of purple and pink, he felt a tug on his line. He reeled it in, a small but feisty bass fighting him all the way. He smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. He carefully removed the hook and gently released the fish back into the dark, cool water. He watched it disappear with a flick of its tail. He didn't need to keep it. The act of connecting and then letting go was enough. True wealth isn't found in expensive houses or designer clothes. It's built on a foundation of truth. It's the quiet pride in a day's work, the trust of your community, and the peace you find in your own heart when you live a life of integrity. You can't buy it, and you can't fake it. You simply have to grow it, season after season. Thank you for joining us for this story on Love Beyond Pride. If Dwayne's journey toward healing and purpose resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience and justice.